Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So obviously the number one topic the last 4 or 5 days has been Zach Hyman because he scored 50 goals on Sunday. People started to call him tap-in merchant, power play merchant, McDavid merchant. Then on Tuesday, someone criticized his goddamn dad for being rich, and that's why he's in the NHL. That's why he ended up being a 50-goal scorer. It's because he was so privileged. But I don't even want to talk about that video especially. I want to talk about Zach Hyman and when it comes to free agent signings, because Pierre LeBrun, before he hit 50 on Saturday night, posted this saying that Zach Hyman, in his 2 cents, is probably the best UFA market signing in more than a decade. He ended up hitting 50 goals, and it got me thinking, what are the best free agency signings over the last 10 years? So we're going to give my top 10. We're going to go starting at number 10 all the way down, and this is going to be based on how good they've played, what their deal. Some of these deals obviously have expired. Some of them are still going on. So in terms of the ones that did happen, what was their cap hit? How did they perform over the duration of the contract? And in terms of the ones that are ongoing, how are they playing right now? How do they project what age they are? And of course, the cap hit price. So in looking at this, some honorable mentions that I do want to mention: Joe Pavelski signing. With these, first off, before we say that, with that, I'm only doing guys that change teams. I'm not doing guys that hit the open market that ended up re-signing with their teams. So Joe Pavelski, 3 years, $7 million missed, because people forget his first season in Dallas wasn't that good. He had 31 points in 67 games. Then he would be point per game the next 2 seasons. Still a great deal, but that first season, as a result, he's not going to be on the list. Pietrangelo signing a 7-year, $8.8 million contract. Don't get me wrong. If you're Vegas, you're doing that deal 10 out of 10 times, considering they did go on to win the Stanley Cup. But I am going to look at it this more of an individual standpoint, not just how their team's doing in the playoffs, because a player doesn't have a massive impact on how deep their team goes in the playoffs, unless we're talking about goddamn Connor McDavid. So Pietrangelo, very good deal, but I think at $8.8 million, you expected him to be a number one. He's been okay. He's lived up to that expectation, and he's still 34 years old with 3 more years at $8.8 million. So he's not on it. Ryan Miller signed a 3-year, $6 million deal back in 2014 or 2015. He was a very good starter, but did miss out. And Chris Tanev signing a 4-year, $4.5 million contract with the Calgary Flames. Good deal. I wouldn't call it an absolute steal in order to crack this list, but he has been one of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL on that deal. So up first, at number 10, I got Claude Giroux. 3 years, $6.5 million deal. He obviously returned to where he grew up for the most part, in Ottawa, and he had a great first season in Ottawa after only having 65 points in 75 games. Still very good. The prior season, he had 35 goals, 44 assists, 74 points, legit top 50 to 70 player in the entire NHL that season. He was fantastic both ways, playing with Stützle, playing with Tkachuk. He was great, and even this year he's playing very well as well. 19 goals, 40 assists, 59 points in 70 games, so probably going to hit the 70-point mark yet again. And I have no reason to believe, and I think he might even improve on this season next year when the Senators hopefully are better, hopefully above a goddamn 500-point team. So in looking at it, he's going to be, over the duration of this contract, assuming he goes for 70, 75, a mid-70-point scorer, only making $6.5 million. He would be higher, but again, 6.75 is high second-line money, low first-line money. So he's definitely far exceeded it. He's been a near $8 million player, in my opinion. So in looking at it, very good deal, but it's only at number 10. Number 9, Frank Vatrano, 3 years, $3.65. He obviously signed this after having a pretty decent run after getting traded to the Rangers. Then the Rangers go on to make the Eastern Conference Finals. And he was very solid in his first year in Anaheim. Well worth $3.65 million. Probably worth around $5 million, with 22 goals, 21 assists, 41 points in 81 games. And this year he's obviously elevated himself to another level with 30 goals, 21 assists, 51 points in 72 games. And he's only shooting 12.7%. It's not like some of the guys that I talked about in the most improved videos that are shooting 18, 22%. This is very sustainable what he's doing right now. He's 46th in the entire NHL in expected goals, ahead of Steven Stamkos, who's 47th, and Hughes, who's 48th. Obviously, Hughes did miss some games. But when looking at it, the underlying numbers back it up. He is a good first liner, only making $3.65 million this year. And next year, it was a fantastic deal by the Anaheim Ducks. Maybe they should have traded him at the deadline, but that's another story. That's another topic for another day. Tyler Toffoli, 4 years, $4.25 million, signed with the Montreal Canadiens. His first season in Montreal, 44 points in 52 games, was a sizable part of their eventual Stanley Cup final role. Then next season has a bit of a down year, 20 goals, 29 assists, 49 points, which is still well worth $4.25 million. But in terms of this contract, it was a down year, because next year he would go on to have 73 points, was fantastic for the Calgary Flames. And this year, right now, 30 goals, 20 assists, 50 points in 72 games. So over this contract, over the 4 years, he's had 112 goals, 104 assists for 216 points in 278 games, which puts him on 33 goal, 31 assist, 64-point pace when it comes to an 82-game season. So all that for 4 seasons at $4.25 million. It was an absolutely fantastic deal by the Montreal Canadiens. Number 7, Vincent Trocheck. This was a pretty risky deal when he signed it, considering he was 28 years old. He was coming off a season of just 51 points, but he's been well worth the money, obviously. First season, plays with Panarin, has a very solid season, 22 goals, 42 assists for 64 points. Definitely worth $5.63 million. I don't know if I said the contract. 7 years, $5.63 million. Definitely worth that $5.6 million, probably worth like 6.5. Now this year, obviously, Panarin has elevated his game, but Trocheck has as well. Trocheck has been very good for the New York Rangers. 25 goals, 47 assists, 72 points in 72 games. So definitely he benefits from playing with Artemi Panarin, but I think he is even if you didn't have that good of a winger, if you just had a very good winger, he'd still be putting up probably around 65, maybe even 70 points. So to get that at $5.63 million for the New York Rangers that are deep in their window of contending, it has been a very good deal. I could maybe put it higher, but I am a little bit skeptical on how it's going to age, like the final years of this, considering, again, he is going to be 31 in July this summer. So when looking at it, he still has 5 more years of this contract. But right now, it's a very good contract, and overall, it's going to be well worth the surplus value that the New York Rangers are going to get from this. Number six, I got Ryan O'Reilly, a deal that was signed last summer, 4 years, $4.5 million. He had a bit of a down year last year, considering he started out with the St. Louis Blues, gets traded to the Leafs, gets hurt on the Leafs, only plays like 50 games, had like 31 points. But this year, he's been fantastic. 25 goals, 36 assists, 61 points in 71 games on the hottest team in the entire NHL. He's been the number 1 center for them. And when looking at him, he's been worth probably $8 million, $8.5 million. I don't think that that's ridiculous. When you look at Ryan O'Reilly's overall body of work, he's not just on pace for 70 points this season. He's also fantastic defensively. I would have him at number 5 if he can sustain this play over the next couple of years, but he is 33 years old with 3 years left. I would put him over number 5 if he keeps this up, but number 5 is a contract that we've seen the full duration of, and that is David Perron on a 4-year, $4 million deal. When looking at it, he signed this in the summer of 2017. He was on the summer of 2018. He was on the Blues in 2016, then goes to the Knights for their 2017-2018 run. Obviously, they make the Stanley Cup final. Then he signs back with the St. Louis Blues, 4 years, $4 million. And he was great on this deal. When looking at it over the 4 seasons, he had 94 points. Obviously, they would go on to win the Stanley Cup in 2019. But when looking at it, 94 goals, 127 assists, 221 points in 251 games. So he was on pace for 31 goals, 42 assists, 73 points over an 82-game sample size over the 4 years of this contract at $4 million. That is fantastic. Again, if Ryan O'Reilly does what he's doing right now over the next 3 years, I'd probably go with Ryan O'Reilly, considering he's a center and he has a far better defensive impact than David Perron, who's also solid defensively. But when looking at it, David Perron, the fact that we saw this contract age out completely, this was between, he was like 29 and 33 years old versus Ryan O'Reilly's going to take him into 36 years old. I do have Perron right now over Ryan O'Reilly. At number 4, Eric Staal, 3 years, $3.5 million. In the summer of 2016, Eric Staal kind of looked washed for the most part. Like not like washed like a bad player, but he was kind of a shell of himself, shell of his Carolina late 2000s kind of self. He only had 39 points in 83 games that season. Of course, he got traded to the New York Rangers. So he signed kind of like a prove it last chance deal with the Minnesota Wild, and he was well worth it at only $3.5 million. His first season, he had 28 goals, 37 assists, 65 points, was their number 1 center. Then the following season has one of the most unexpected 40-goal seasons in NHL history, back when 40 goals is basically the new 50 goals for the most part. He had 42 goals, 76 points, got Hart votes in that season. He was so valuable to his 101-point Minnesota Wild team, only making $3.5 million. He was a legit top 20 player in the entire NHL that season. He was fantastic. And even in the final season of that deal, still 52 points, which was a bit of a dip down. But again, he was only making $3.5 million. This was an absolutely fantastic deal by the Minnesota Wild, basically getting a number 1 center for 3 years at only $3.5 million. Number 3, Linus Ullmark. Ullmark, 4 years, $5 million. They expected him to be a low-end starter. He's obviously surpassed that. First season, 41 games, a 9.17, a very good starter for the Boston Bruins. Then, of course, wins the Vezina with a goddamn 9.38 and a 1.9. Well worth $5 million, probably worth $8-9 million that season. Yes, he was on a loaded Bruins team, but they were in part a record-breaking team because they had Linus Ullmark in goal. He was fantastic. He was far better than Jeremy Swayman last year. And then this year, he's more so the 1B. They've split games about evenly. He still has a 9.13 in 35 games. So when looking at Ullmark, he's been well over, or definitely first and third season, I'd say he'd been like a $6-7 million goalie. And in that Vezina winning season, well worth $8-9 million. And I think next season, he's not that old. So next season, he should be a very good starter, whether he's playing in Boston and he's like the 1B or he goes somewhere else. I think he can be a very good player as well. Fantastic deal for Don Sweeney in the Boston Bruins. Number 2, it's obviously between Hyman and Panarin at this point. Who do I go with? Do I go with the Ranger? Do I go with the Oiler? I'm obviously more biased towards the Oilers. Not a big Ranger fan. I have Hyman at number 2. Hyman at number 2, 7 years, $5.5 million. This is obviously a great deal. First season, 27 and 27 for 54 points. You thought, oh, even if he's that's well worth like $5.5 million with the salary cap eventually rising. That wasn't it. Obviously, last year he had 36 goals, 47 assists, 83 points. And now this year, 51 goals, 19 assists. He is exactly what McDavid wants in a line mate. Physical presence, net front presence that can clean up after him. He has been fantastic. But when it comes to this, we'll get into Panarin, but like he is more so a complimentary piece. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Again, it's still a fantastic deal, but he's not, I wouldn't expect him, if he signed this deal with like 25 other teams, obviously other teams with elite centers, does he sniff this kind of production? I don't think so. Again, that's not a knock on him. He's still a very good player. He's definite top 100 player in the NHL for me, but he's not quite the superstar that Artemi Panarin is. 7 years, $11.6 million. You look at it, his first season obviously was fantastic, 95 points in 69 games. I think he was a Hart, third place in the Hart that year. I think he was a Hart finalist. And then this year, 43 goals, 59 assists, 102 points, 72 games. He has 2 seasons of being worthy of being a Hart finalist, being worthy of being a $14-15 million player. And just when looking at this, even in his down years, like his second and third year, he was still over 100-point pace. Last year was his big down year, and it was still 92 points. He kind of shot the bed in the playoffs, though. But when looking at it, Hyman compared to Panarin, I understand on a per-game production basis, it definitely is Hyman. It's no doubt Hyman in terms of who's the better signing. But I think in terms of who has the overall bigger impact on their team, even with the money considered, I think Panarin being that superstar for the New York Rangers is just so massive. I don't think over the last 5 years for the most part, Dan Panarin's been there for a while. I don't know if the New York Rangers are a playoff team besides probably 2022 when Shesterkin absolutely carried this team. The cultural, the overall impact that he has made on this team in being their star forward, because let's be honest, Capo Caco, very big disappointment. Lafreniere developing, but up until this point has been a massive disappointment. Them getting that superstar that you rarely get in free agency back in 2019 completely changed the outlook of this team, and obviously getting Adam Fox because he demanded his way to New York. That has been the kicking off point of this New York Rangers era. It's the Panarin era, in my opinion. 2019 on, he has been one of the best players in the entire NHL. So although Zach Hyman is more productive on a per dollar basis, you got to factor in the fact he plays with McDavid. Again, he's not a McDavid merchant. He's not a Tappan merchant, but you cannot ignore the obvious when it comes to that. Versus Panarin, 2 seasons of being arguably top 5 player in the entire NHL, another 2 seasons of being a top 15 to 20 guy, and only really 1 down year. I think he needs to be the pick in terms of the best free agency signing of the last decade. But let me know in the comments, what do you think? 10 Giroux, 9 Vetrano, 8 Toffoli, 7 Trocheck, Ryan O'Reilly at number 6, Perron at 5, Stahl at 4, Ullmark at 3, Hyman at 2, and Panarin at 1. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? And I'll be seeing the next one. I hate to defend the Rangers, but it's the right choice.